הלל גלזר, שהוא יועץ אסטרטגי, הוא ידבר באנגלית, ההצגה תהיה באנגלית, אבל ניסיון של מעל 35 שנה בהובלת התפתחות וחדשנות תפעולית בחברות ובארגונים בינלאומיים, מוכר בשיטתו לחיזוק המצוינות התפעולית ולהתמודד עם אתגרי תמיכה ניהולית, ומחבר הספר High Performance Operation, שזה בעצם הדבר העיקרי שהוא ידבר אליו. איך על הפרדוקס שבצמיחה ניהולית, ואיך מצוינות תפעולית מאפשרת להאיץ את הצמיחה הארגונית.
בוקר טוב, and that's the last of the Hebrew. I'm not sure what you see in that image first. Once I tell you what it actually is, it becomes impossible to not see it. But it's a pretty good metaphor. Looking at performance through the eyes of executives, what we see is that executives are focused on things that are other than performance. And I never said thank you to Mao. Thank you, Zahal. And performance professionals like us are often not focused on what's important to the executives. So the executives are not looking at performance the way we look at it, and we're not looking at performance the way they look at it. What we'll talk about today is that it's not enough to tie performance to whatever it is that the executives are focused on, because just tying it to what they're focused on ends up missing the mark. Has anyone figured that out yet? Forks, yeah, mazlegot. How many of you are either working in companies to improve their performance or working as consultants to companies? It really doesn't matter. One way or the other, we're looking at improving the performance of a company. If that's your role, you may often wonder why it seems like your never-ending struggle is to be taken seriously. You wonder why you always feel like no one really wants you and no one wants to hear your message about improving performance. It's as if every time you try to talk about improving performance, you're beating your head against the wall. I don't know about the rest of you, but that's been my career. So I'll tell you why. Most organizational performance experts typically start with one of two different approaches. Either they start by talking about training, people, incentives, motivation, or they start by talking about processes. I'm not going to talk much about the side of people because that is a much bigger topic and I don't have the time to do it justice. It's very important, but we're going to talk instead about process because I can talk about that in much less time. So let me tell you about that. Processes are the enemy of innovation and opportunity. Seriously. Some of you are like, no, our whole career has been made to tell about how process is important to making innovation opportunity, but actually it's not. Do we agree that in addition to people, top performance relies on process? I think most of us would agree that, yeah, what are you saying? Why are you saying it doesn't? So, okay, yeah, am I contradicting myself? Yes and no. Let's set the contradiction aside for the moment because the real issue is that process, performance, and growth are inherently in conflict with, performance and growth are inherently in conflict with process. It's that the executives perceive them to be in conflict. It's because executives mostly experience process and performance as a way, in the way of doing what they want to do. It's in the way of and not an enabler of performance. To paraphrase Elie Wiesel, perception is reality. So we need to deal with the executive's perception. Many of us are into performance because we weren't interested in sales or product market strategy or marketing or developing opportunities. We kind of like the inside guts of how things work, and the outside stuff is for somebody else. But soon we're going to talk about how our own predispositions affect our effectiveness and the performance that we try to put in place. So let's first talk a little bit about innovation and opportunity. So what does innovation depend on? It depends on failure. Innovation depends on failure, trial and error. It depends on experimenting and pivoting. It depends on responding fast. It depends on abandoning sunk costs. It depends on ignoring what others are doing. And sometimes that it means ignoring best practices. In other words, innovation depends on making mistakes and throwing stuff away. As performance professionals, the very thought of not using best practices, the very thought of making things and throwing them away is making our skin crawl. It sounds too much like waste and instability. But you know what is not part of innovation? Stability. So here we are trying to do something that is inherently in conflict with what the executives and the sales team and everybody else is trying to do. Growth depends on risk. The problem is that innovation, when your pursuit of innovation is a goal, you want to increase variation and variability. You want to crank through as many possible solutions in as little time as you have. You don't want to completely develop something and then get to the market, only find out then that it's not going to sell. This is just sound familiar? Like you don't want to develop products without requirements? It's the same thing, only on a bigger scale. The problem is that in innovation, opportunity depends on uncertainty. The language of innovation, the language of opportunity is to increase variation. You want to crank through as many solutions, and the uncertainty leads to speculation. You work a lot more in speculative business than you do when you're after innovation and opportunities. Because it depends on innovation, specifically risk, uncertainty, and variation go together. Those three words are essentially what investors look at. They look at the risk, they look at the uncertainty, and they look at other variables in the market. These are literally the words that when we walk into the CEO's office, we're saying we're going to get rid of that. So we walk into the room saying we're going to reduce your risk, we're going to eliminate uncertainty, and we're going to tamp down variation. And what they hear, you're going to kill innovation. That's what they hear. So no wonder that they don't have the patience for that. But we don't need new words. We need to use their words. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today is how to use their words. What does that look like? So for those of you who know something about aerodynamics, you know that stability and maneuverability don't go together. This works exactly in operations. Stable platforms, stable businesses are not inherently maneuverable platforms, maneuverable businesses. Growth, innovation, and opportunity depend on maneuverability, not stability. If we want to win the hearts and minds of the executives, our jobs are to make sure that performance is tied to maneuverability. Executives instinctively know that in the market, maneuverability is lethal and stability is vulnerable. And we know that you can't really get maneuverability without structure, strength, capabilities, planning, rigor, discipline, and all that. So how do we get them to work together? You can see why if stability and maneuverability are in opposition to each other, that our jobs seem impossible because they're never going to listen to us. But that's just a perception. Performance doctrine tells us that we need stability and certainty to improve cost and quality. But growth and innovation doctrine tells us that we need to throw things away and put them into the market to see how the market responds, to tease out requirements from the market that tell us what we're supposed to put back into it. This conflict only exists if we treat performance in a process vacuum. If there's nothing else but performance and it doesn't matter to the rest of the business as far as the market's concerned. When we are aligned with and in pursuit of opportunity, then process and performance becomes the fuel of innovation. Executives see them as competing priorities, but that's because they mostly have experienced, I mentioned it before, they experience performance as bureaucracy and not performance as agility. In reality, it's performance at all levels and everywhere in the company that accelerates innovation and opportunity, but we have to do it in a way that makes sense to the executives. This requires that we focus what we're working on as far as performance goes on growth innovation and opportunity rather than focusing it narrowly on product development and operational efficiency. We're not going to be successful improving organizational performance if we ignore this perception about performance being part of bureaucracy. Opportunity, growth, and innovation are much more exciting, talking from personal experience, and they're much more interesting to executives than the internal details of the business. Somehow they forget that there's this inside of the company. We need to insert ourselves into the reality and the language and the priorities of leadership. So no amount of saying we need to improve performance is going to change the reality that the executives want more than increased performance is more opportunities and growth. In fact, it's not just the executives and their perception of growth as opposing to opportunity. It's the kind of performance that we're talking about is different from an accounting perspective. Even when accounting for our kind of performance, it shows up in a different part of the profit and loss than the executive's kind of performance. Operations are on the side of balance sheet where saving money is the priority, where product innovation, delivery, and chasing opportunities is on the side of the balance sheet where spending money, risking money, and investing money is the priority. Even when the profit and loss accounting for these two aspects aren't the same, how do you expect us to optimize for performance when the accounting is different? One of the problems is that this is a conversation that almost never takes place in the CFO's office, Chief Financial Officer. So, what we need to start doing is to speak the language of the CEO. Given the choice between improving performance and increasing opportunity, which do you think the CEOs want more? Don't have to admit it out loud, but we pretty much all know that they want to be talking the language of opportunity, not the language of this is going to be hard work. Telling them that we need to improvements is like telling them to stop eating pizza and go for a run. And that's just not what they want to hear. So how do we start talking their language? Before you answer that, take a look at this. Which meetings are the CEOs usually canceling? Are they canceling performance meetings with people like us? Or are they canceling sales and business meetings with the sales team or the customers? So hopefully, if that's been your experience, you can relate to exactly what part of the business the CEOs want to be paying attention to. So if we speak the language of growth, that is opportunities and innovation and sales, while delivering performance results, we actually gain CEO mind share and we start to build them an innovation runway. But here's a secret that we know that they don't. Most of you, or hopefully many of you, have heard Theodore Roosevelt's famous quote, "Carry a big stick, speak softly, but carry a big stick." So I try to change this and speak the language of growth, but carry the, speak opportunities, sales, innovation, while carrying the stick of performance. Of course, you can't just speak the language, you have to also know how to tie it together for real. You have to understand what goes into growth and opportunity and sales. In other words, the lens of the executives is looking at it from the lens of the executives. You see what we're looking for is what they're looking for. Operational excellence is not the opposite of growth, it's the engine. Performance experts, I'm just reading the slide, who speak the language of growth connect directly with executive priorities. Better performance leads to faster opportunity capture and sustained growth. So if we look at performance through the same lenses, then we become their growth partners, not just their operators. Performance really does lead to innovation and opportunity, but it may do so in a way that we haven't been doing because it's not how we've been trained. So I'm going to explain how to make performance lead to innovation and opportunity. Whether you're internal or external, the problem is what we're selling may not meet selling the idea sales, selling the wrong ideas. We're selling performance when what we should be selling is opportunity. The road to opportunity is paved with performance bricks. Speed. Speed is the language of opportunity. Speed is also the universal forcing function. Speed is the one thing that everyone values, whether they're operators, innovators, executives. startups can excel because they are built on short feedback loops, fast decisions, quick pivots, the elements of speed. Scaling up organizations can keep this advantage by aligning what they look at from performance with what it does for opportunity. When performance boosts speed and speed fuels opportunity, we erase the line between what it means to operate well and what it means to respond fast. They become the same thing. This is one area where startups and early stage companies have an advantage over established companies. My office is in an incubator. I do most of my work coaching early stage companies now. And startups innately understand speed. They understand that what they're trying to speed up is revenue. So, at what point do businesses stop caring about speeding up revenue? Ultimately, that's what keeps the company alive. Cash is king. If companies never stop speeding up revenue, why do we, as operational and organizational performance people, ever stop looking at what we do as working on speeding up revenue? Now, I've met a few companies who think, well, we're big enough, we don't have to worry about speeding up revenue, and I watch them spiral out of control. Somebody might come along and save them, but it's usually not a good master plan. Early stage companies have few processes to slow things down. They deeply appreciate the need for insanely rapid responsiveness, and they don't have the luxuries of money and people and resources to take too many swings at the piñata. This is what early stage companies are worried about. Early stage companies leverage speed because they're simple, which is important because when you grow, there's no reason to entirely lose this focus. Early stage companies are stuck or living this cycle all the time. Hopefully they're living the whole cycle, not just stuck in one of them. That cycle right there, believe it or not, that's the cycle that makes money. That cycle of delivering solutions to a market, in other words, solving market problems. Forget the middle part for the minute. Solving market problems is what makes money. Pretty much end of discussion. If it's not solving a market problem, you're not going to make money. Why? Because no one's going to pay you for it. You're getting paid, whoever you're building, whatever service, whatever product, you're getting paid to solve a problem in the market. Exactly what the solution is or what the product is, that really is secondary. Because frankly, if you had a magic wand and they'd pay you to wave it and make it go away, that's all they want. There's value in waving the magic wand so the problems go away. What's weird though is when we show up, this is where we focus. Almost entirely on product and solution delivery. Everything we do is like, make that cheaper, do that faster, make that less time, use less waste. The business proposition, the business value of what we do is so buried literally in the value proposition of the business to the market that you should not be surprised that the executives don't pay attention to us. Because where they want to focus is there. That's where the value is. That's where the money is. The money is not here. Now, yeah, we want to make that less money than what it costs to sell. But still, that's not where the value is. It's not where the executives are focused. The executives are focused on the outside. So I've been teasing this whole speed thing for long enough. Hopefully most of you recognize the contraption in the background. The contraption in the background is nothing more, nothing less than the entire origin story of Lean. I mean, all of it. This contraption led to the Toyota production system. It led to just-in-time. It led to G-Coda. It led to Kaizen. It led to Muda-Murmuri. It led to 5S, Six Sigma, Kanban, value stream mapping, Poka-yoke, and I mean all of it. This one contraption led to all of that. And that was Sakichi Toyoda, with a D before they changed the name, and his family's weaving machines. And it started with one thought. How do we reduce, if not eliminate, the lag between when an event happens and our ability to respond to it? How do we make that time as short as possible, if not eliminate it? Because that one idea of not building in broken tapestries, broken cloth, led to everything else. When you eliminate the time it takes to respond to an event, positive or negative, what does that do? First of all, when you understand and apply that speed between event and response is what makes companies perform better, and that this performance benefit shows up in everything the company does, it becomes the fundamental single metric you need to improve performance or to measure performance, applied everywhere to everything. When you look at the world for how speed is key, then you start to see that waiting around for anything is bad. Losing time due to multitasking and context switching is bad. We knew that already, but now you see it show up in speed. And that pretty much everything that's bad for quality is also bad for performance. And pretty much everything that we did wrong to get bad quality is probably related to speed. Not enough time, not enough resources, et cetera. So some of you are like, oh, he's just going back and saying the old thing we've been doing for 50 years of focus on quality. And I'm saying, no, that's not what I'm saying. That's exactly not what I'm saying. Because again, no one will listen. It's not like they listened for the last 50 years. Why should they start now? What I'm saying is when you're looking at speed, you start seeing that there are alignment issues in the company. There's alignment issues there's a problem between the market position of the company, its value proposition, the business model, operating model, and everything else. You start to see where things are slowing down, you start to understand there's a problem. If it's too slow, that's a performance problem. So what you get, of course, is faster and better everything. Market response, customer response, products to market, innovation, decisions, error catching, correction, accountability, autonomy, automation, value delivery. All of that gets better just by focusing on speed. Are you going to get it all at once? Of course not. Because this is the irony. So many businesses are focused on budget, but what the research has found and what a personal direct experience has found is that the budget is actually not what the customer wants. Because when you back up and look at the life cycle, the customer wants to solve problems they have. Customer being the market, the problems are what they're solving. That's what they want. So what they'd rather do is start solving problems sooner. Any problems. Not budget, not product, all of the product. Now, not philosophically, because not every product works if you only deliver parts of it. But if you can start delivering solutions, if they start having the opportunity to solve their problems sooner, meaning speed, then that's what they're paying for. That's what they want. And they will actually pay a premium if you're able to do it sooner rather than do all of it sometime later. So what do you need? Everyone needs to know, first of all, you have to have communication, coordination, and synchronization. Nothing else matters. If you did nothing else but implement a way that everyone knows how to communicate, coordinate, and synchronize, then you're already halfway there. Because surprisingly, I found that when I walk into a company and they're having performance issues, they're having performance with these simple three things. They're also having performance with visibility. And so you put that in place, and next thing you know, they don't know where the ball is, they don't know which direction to go, and they don't know how much time is left on the clock. Again, communication, coordination, and synchronization, plus knowing where to go, knowing where everything is, and knowing how much time you have left. Those are the things that you can do without a lot of extra changes, without a lot of transformation. Of course, none of that changes the people side. We still need uninterrupted work time. We still need full kitting. Do they have the know-how? Do they have the materials? Do they have the information? And psychological safety. So I said earlier, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. This is all the time I'm spending on people because those don't change. So what can you do? First, start by understanding what causes businesses to get stuck. For the most part, executives understand and trust the sales process because they can see top line very well. Where the money goes from there is more of a mystery. So when performance nerds like us come to them and say, we can save you money, we literally have a hard time showing them the money. They can't see that what we've done because they literally can't see it. It's delayed gratification, and most executives have lost patience for delayed gratification. They also get stuck because even when they intellectually understand performance, they lack the tools. They lack the tools, because they didn't learn it in business school. They didn't learn it in project management. And if you come from my neck of the woods, godforsaken CMMI, those tools are simply insufficient to quickly fix problems when they show up. They're just not there. They don't teach you how to fix problems. They teach you really well how to get into problems. So what do businesses do? When they run into performance problems, they initiate some sort of transformation. This activity essentially breaks the company, then tries to reset it back to some default setting that worked initially, and they understand that default setting. This allows them to go back to something they understood at one point, and they're hoping it's going to work again for a little while longer. The problem is, it's break, rebuild, repeat, and who wouldn't get tired of that? So here's the underlying truth. The problem with businesses and business schools and project management practices is that they do not address the underlying truth. The fact is, the world moves faster than processes can keep up. The processes, in essence, ignore physics because the processes don't take into account that we can't control time, we can't do more than one thing at a time, and we can't be in two places more than once, at the same time. Then we conveniently ignore all that. We put together something called a risk management plan and supposedly believe that this risk management plan is going to somehow undo the fact that we violated the laws of physics. The ugly truth about businesses is that in the vast majority of cases, the executives would rather give away bottom line in order to achieve top line. They can worry about the bottom line later, but the top line they can see right now. We wish that wasn't true, but we kind of know it is. We wish executives were mature enough to understand the fact that money in the bank comes from bottom line, but it's good luck trying to get them to act on that. Intellectually, they know it's true. They know profit comes from selling for more than it costs to build. But instinctively, they can find it easier to just sell more and pray that operations can deliver. Because they can see it. They can see the contract. They can see the sale. They know that brings in money if they can deliver. And they just have faith. And I don't know why they do that, but they do, and we all know it. What I do know is that trying to get them to care is a never-ending struggle. So I decided to not struggle anymore, and I'm going to join them in their pursuit of more sales and opportunities by selling growth. As I walk in the door, when I talk to a business, I don't talk to them about what they're stuck and how much their costs are. I talk to them about how much are you able to sell? How fast are you able to grow? How much can you turn opportunity into cash? And suddenly I have their attention. Because whether you're an internal performance agent or an external consultant, we sell them on the idea of growth. In their minds, that's sales opportunities and innovation. And what they don't realize is to get that, they actually need to perform well. They actually let us do our jobs. To close the gap between when an event happens and their ability to respond to that event, they actually understand that. We don't have to get complicated with the math here. So it doesn't matter if the event's positive or negative, being able to respond is what makes them competitive. And luckily, those tools are available to us even if we didn't get them in business school or at Project Management Institute. Speed works on both sides of the P&L. Of course, I'm not talking about cut corners, hurry up, work more. It's actual speed. So we're almost at the end here. Speeding up the right things for the right reasons. Before we can pursue speed, we have to make sure that we're speeding up the right things. And this is where operational people get a chance to really shine. To make it happen, we have to make sure that there is alignment. Alignment between the market position, the value proposition, the business model, operating model, and everything beneath that. We begin to operate strategically when we talk about operating these things. I can tell you from an experience from an exact client, but I don't have the time. Later we can talk about the client. But let me just tell you this. When I stopped talking about operations and started talking about value proposition, market positioning, and sales, all of a sudden the conversation was engaging, and they were extremely happy. So what do? True growth only happens when performance enables opportunity and innovation, but not when they compete. So help companies grow their opportunities. Look beyond organizational performance. Ensure that they're aligned strategically. You might have to start thinking about the product solution fit journey. You may have to look at that big picture, the solution market journey. And when it comes to speed, speed isn't important, it's everything. Thank you all for your attention. Be in touch. I've got some cards. So hopefully have a great conference. Thanks, Zohar.